The views and opinions of the guests on the Wyleaner Show are those of the guests and are not necessarily the views and opinions of the hostess Wyleaner and or her co-host.
Is there racism in your church? Are the leaders of the church dealing with racism? Hello, everybody. I'm Wyleaner, the Las Vegas Queen of Gospel.
And I'm Amy Rucker, the voice for my generation.
Hello, we are excited to be back with you again today. I tell you what, we about to bust a move on y'all. The rubber's gonna meet the road on here on this show today.
Yes,
I'll tell you what, we have got a show for you. Show.com. Everybody who is watching on YouTube and Google Hangout in Pakistan and Tumblr and welcoming all of our Facebook fans.
Yes,
everybody, we welcome everybody back, and we are excited to be back with you again today. And I want to welcome my co-host, Miss Amy, back today. What's going on, girl? You really think you cute, don't you?
No, I'm just fly.
Okay, well, I tell you what, I ain't mad at you. I ain't mad at you. I'm excited that we are back. Miss Amy, are you excited to be back?
Yes.
Okay.
It's going down.
What's been going on?
Nothing. Just I was out of town in Philadelphia. Oh, it was freezing. Oh, I'm still thawing out.
Okay. And did I see you in a plane or something?
Yeah, I'm a big old kid.
You a pilot now?
No, I was just taking a picture. I was like, listen, can I get in the cockpit? I need to take.
I saw you in a picture on the plane. I was like, no, wait a minute. I hope she fly back to Vegas in time for the Wyleaner show.
I wouldn't miss it. Listen, you're gonna always learn something that I wouldn't miss it.
I know. I'm excited that you came back, and thanks for being here with me to sit with me and let's bust a move.
Yes.
Okay. And so everybody, we have so much that we want to share with you today, and we have our guest that we brought back with us, and he is Pastor DELWYN Campbell, who is calling in, logging in with us from California. Paris, California, and we're excited that he's going to be back with us today. But before we get into that, in lieu of our regular commercial break that we normally do, Miss Amy has some information that she wants to share with you all. So we're going to allow her to do that, and then we'll get on with the show because we're going to bust a move on y'all today. Get ready. Okay, so go ahead, Miss Amy.
Public service announcement press release. Las Vegas Black History Month will begin in Las Vegas with an arousing celebration of gospel music as the annual Las Vegas Gospel Music Award begins the month on February 5th, Friday, February 5th, at the Ron DeCars Event Center, located at 1201 Las Vegas Boulevard. The doors open at 6 p.m. for dinner, with the show starting at 7 p.m. Each year, the Black Music Association focuses on the best of the best gospel entertainers, singers, musicians, choirs, bands, and worship and praise teams in Las Vegas for the city's very own tribute to those who are performing and recording gospel music. This event is widely popular as they feature special tributes to music icons, legends, and history makers, and contribute mightily to the gospel music segment of Las Vegas. The city is home to many gospel greats and nationally recognized recording stars such as Patty Pennington, Dwayne Anderson, David Braley, Michael Lowry, King Young, Arthur Hardin, God's Poet, Callie Ross, Brittany Soul, and over 100 more artists who represent the gospel music in Las Vegas that are nominated in the variety of categories. Throughout this special event, performers and awards will be presented by their tier performers, with awards given to Pastor Robert Fowler, Pastor Kelsey West, Dr. Ronald Thomas, Pastor Sammy Richards, Sam Stewart, Pastor Sam Robertson, and Tawai Leaner, Las Vegas' very own queen of gospel. Special guest artists are holy hip-hop recording sensation TOS, who will be performing his top chart song, All I Know. Legendary hip-hop performer Sparky D, who is now rapping for God, will deliver a stellar performance as she graces the awards show. This is an exciting way to bring Black History Month to Las Vegas. The African American history of struggle and achievement, slavery and freedom can be directly attributed to impact of gospel music. It is the music of a people who sing their praises to overcome the many challenges of oppression and integrity. The faith of gospel music helped build the nation, and we proudly celebrate the incredible artists who make Las Vegas the gospel music capital of America, said Rick Warren, president of Black Music Association and Academy of America. The show will be packed with entertainment, awards, comedy, and hosts by 11-time BMA award-winning artist Frederick Westbrook, Henry Black, the president of the Gospel Announcer Broadcasters Association, and recording star Terrellyn Ramsey. Special guest presenter from radio, television, music, and films will also be on stage to make this Black History Month kickoff event even more special, added Warren. Tickets and information to the Las Vegas Gospel Music Award is available at www.rondecareventcenter.com or by phoning 702-608-4648.
All righty, Miss Amy. Woo! That sounds like that's getting ready to be something.
Yeah, it's gonna be exciting.
Sound like it's gonna be on. I guess I have to go, huh?
Yeah, she's gonna. Yeah, she's gonna be in the building.
I guess I'll be in the building, in the room. How about it?
Yes. Trust me, you know she's in the building too. She's gonna make sure you know.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. It sounds like a very exciting event, and I'm looking forward to it. And I'm actually excited to be one of the honorees. So,
yeah, congratulations!
Thank you.
I will be in the building too.
You gonna bust? I
ain't gonna try to outdo her. I'm gonna let her be the queen of gospel. I'll be the princess that night.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. Okay, I tell you what, we gotta get things going here. Thank you so much, Miss Amy, for sharing that information. And if you want to let everybody know how to reach us today, that'd be great too.
Yes, we can be reached at 1-866-945-1110. The phone lines are open at 5:15. And remember, please be respectful to the guests, because if you are not, we're bound to hang up on you. And again, that number is 1-866-945-1110. Press option 1. We can agree to disagree, but don't get on here with that foolishness.
Oh, Miss Amy, don't be mean to the folks. You said we don't play?
No.
We don't play. On the Wiley Show, we do not play, okay? Don't call up in here tripping, imitating, chipping, okay? Have some respect.
Yes.
Have some respect for our guests, okay? But we can agree to disagree. Now, you can say they're wrong if you want to. You can say, hey, I beg to differ. I think you're wrong about that. Prove it. Tell me where you got that information from.
Yes.
It's all good. Okay, so listen, we want to welcome our guest back with us today. Pastor DELWYN Campbell is back with us, and I'd like to know, Pastor DELWYN Campbell, are you with us?
Yes, I am.
All righty then. Okay, so Pastor Campbell, welcome back to the Y Leader Show today. And Miss Amy and myself, we are excited to have you back. And you want to tell us a little bit about your week quickly?
Sure. Thank you again for having me back. Excuse me. This has been a very busy week. Tomorrow I am being ordained and installed at Promise Lutheran Church of Marietta. I'll be installed as one of their associate pastors. And in the Lutheran Church, ordination is seen as an integral component of your call. So you are not ordained when you graduate from seminary. You are ordained when a church calls you for the first time. For me, I guess technically this is my second time being ordained because I was ordained in the Church of God in Christ, and now I'm being ordained in the Lutheran Church. But this will be the last time. Too much work.
Okay, all right. Well, congratulations on that. And we're sure that they apparently feel that you're going to do a great job. And so that's why they're ordaining you. So congratulations on that. And we wish you all the best in the future to come in your years of your endeavor.
Thank you.
Okay, so
let's
get this party started. We're gonna strap up. I want everybody to strap up your boots and get ready because the rubber's getting ready to meet the road right about now. We got some information. Listen, last week on the show, we had a lot of discussion going on, and then we had some callers that called in, and one of the callers that called in was a little distraught about the answers that he received or whatever the case may be, and he actually wanted to carry this on just a little bit further. So he sent an email, and this email is to be addressed by you, Pastor Campbell. This email is to be addressed by you, and so we would like it very much if you would address this email as I share it with you. So listen closely to what this person has to say. The caller was Mr. Clayton Miller, who called in from Charlotte, North Carolina. Okay. And so I'm going to share with you what he had to say to you, Pastor Campbell. He says, although Jesus was clearly legally related to both parents, to Mary by being born from her and to Joseph by legal adoption, was he genetically related to them or to his brothers and sisters? That was a question that he had for you. And then he also goes on to say, and I'll let you address that question as soon as I'm done with what he had to say here. He goes on to say, for thousands of years, every human child has been born with an inherited sin nature and sinful flesh. Romans 8:3. This is a result of our sinful first parents, Adam and Eve, to whom we are all genetically related. Each generation without exception has sinned, Romans 3:23, and passed on its sinful nature and the curse of death to each succeeding generation. The biblical doctrine of imputation of sin, Romans 5:12 through 19. There is only one exception in history. Although Jesus grew in the womb of Mary in the same manner as any baby, he was different from all other babies. It appears that he was not genetically related to either Mary or Joseph, for both had an inherited sin nature. Jesus was sinless, and one may reasonably assume without genetic flaw, since he was to serve as the spotless and sacrificial Lamb of God. Ever since the creation, each subsequent life has been created at the moment of conception. Scientifically, the new entity begins at the moment of the DNA of man and woman combined. This was not the case with Jesus. As a spirit and part of the Trinity, Jesus existed before the creation of the world. In fact, John reveals that he is the creator, John 1. Furthermore, the physical body of Jesus was, as born in Bethlehem, was clearly a special creation of God placed in Mary's womb. Hebrews 10:5. A body has thou prepared me. This is the biblical doctrine of the virgin birth. Thus, neither Christ's spirit nor his body must have resulted from the DNA of Mary's egg or from any man's sperm. Both would have contained inherited genetic defects and the sin nature. As scripture tells us, Jesus was truly the second Adam. The first Adam was a special creation of God, not related to any human being, and so was the second Adam. Romans 5:12-19. Jesus was just as fully human as the first Adam. And just like the first Adam, he had no sin nature, no inherited sin, no sinful flesh, which has always been passed from one generation to the next since Adam and Eve's sin. He was absolutely pure and without sin from the day he was born till the day he died. He had to be. He was the Lamb of God, without blemish or spot, sacrificed for sins, John 1:29. For further explanation, see creation and the virgin birth, and when God became a man. So this was sent by Mr. Clayton Miller in Charlotte, North Carolina. And of course, the first question that he asked you initially, Pastor, was, although Jesus was clearly legally related to both parents to Mary, by being born from her, and to Joseph by legal adoption, was he genetically related to them, to his brother, or to his brothers and sisters? Pastor Campbell.
Well, I liked some of what he had to say. Obviously, he quoted profusely from the scriptures. In the interest of time, I won't go into all of the points of argument. However, I would say this. Going back to Genesis chapter 3, the Bible says that of the seed of the woman, God would raise up one who would bruise the serpent's head. Okay.
Okay.
He was the woman. At the same time, we find in the New Testament, when Gabriel comes to Mary, he tells her that she shall conceive and bear a son. When she asked, how would this be, because she had not known a man sexually, he told her, the Holy Spirit shall come upon you. The power of the Most High shall overshadow you, and therefore that holy thing which shall be born of you shall be called the Son of God. Now, to be born of someone, as it was understood by the writers of the Gospels, for example, when Matthew writes that Jesus was begotten of Mary, from whom was born the Christ. They did not think of it in terms of Mary just being an incubator for someone that was completely created, totally out of substance, unconnected to humanity. For Jesus to be one of us, fully human, a son of Adam, he would have to be of human lineage. Now, I understand the idea of saying, well, God could have planted, if you will, a fully formed human egg inside the womb, and it'd be totally disconnected from the rest of humanity. But if that were the case, then Jesus would not have redeemed anything that pertains to us. He would have been a totally different human species altogether. But there's something else I'd like to point out. The Bible tells us in Hebrews that without the shedding of blood, there is no remission. Okay? So it would appear that there is a connection between sin and the blood. In addition, again, Jesus was not connected to Joseph by bloodline. So what I've kind of thought about, and then this is just my thoughts. Is it possible that the sin nature is passed on not through the woman? Because remember, every baby that's born shares in the bloodline of the father. That's how you're able to, for example, do paternity tests. You do blood tests. If the blood matches that of the father, they say, this is his child. If the blood type doesn't match with the father, they say that's not his child. So Jesus did not share Joseph's blood, but he could have shared Mary's DNA if the sin nature is passed on through the father. Another thing to think about with regard to this, until Adam ate of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, there was no problem. Eve ate of it, it was just stuck to her. It wasn't until Adam ate of it, again in Genesis 3, that the eyes of both of them were opened and they knew that they were naked. So again, this is not, at this point, we're not talking about what does the Lutheran Church believe, teach, and confess. This is just me thinking about the situation and, you know, some thoughts that I've had on it. I'm actually considering writing on it, doing some more research on it, and possibly writing about it, because the connection between the blood and sin and the blood and redemption, the blood and cleansing, seems to all point in that direction to me.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for sharing that with us, Pastor Campbell. And you know, hopefully our caller who called in last week, Mr. Clayton from Charlotte, North Carolina. Hopefully, he's tuning in today and he heard what you had to say. And I would assume that if he has any comment or question, he can call in.
Call lines are open. Yes.
Okay.
I understand the basis of his argument that Jesus would have had to have been disconnected genetically from either. And it's an interesting idea, but I would just say that in response to that, if that were the case, then Jesus is disconnected from our race. Therefore, how could he redeem us? He doesn't represent us. It would be just as if God had created a whole new species of humanity.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks for sharing that with us, and we're going to move on now. Okay. So listen, Pastor Campbell, our conversation today, and as of today, and in actuality, it looks like this may roll over into a part 3. And if so, it depends on how things go today, whether or not we'll be rolling into a part 3, but it looks like we probably will. And because we need to talk about racism in the church.
Yes, I gotta hear about this.
I mean,
I gotta hear this.
Most people think that there's no such thing, right, Miss Amy? Do you think there's racism in the church?
That's a good question. I never even thought about it until I seen the topic, and I was like, "Oh man, this is gonna be good."
Okay, so basically, the bottom line is, everybody, if you don't feel that there's racism in your church, I'd like to know, how can you prove that? What is your congregation like? What's the nationalities? What's the predominant nationality of the Lutheran Church, Pastor Campbell?
That's an interesting question. If you look solely at the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod here in the United States, it would probably be, matter of fact, not probably, it is majority Caucasian.
Okay. All right. Okay. So in answer to my question, he said predominantly Caucasian. And okay, so now I think most people, when they go to church, they probably don't look at it and they just see the faces that they're accustomed to seeing on a regular basis. So, Miss Amy, would you say in the African American church, would you say that the races are predominantly Black people?
It's predominantly.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think we can all touch and agree on that. Let's see, Pastor Campbell, would you say the same, that in African American churches, are they predominantly Black people? Yes or no?
For the most part,
Yes
across
or no?
country, yeah.
Yes. Okay. So, so with that being said, how in the world can we say, Pastor Campbell, the people that are in churches, how can they say that there's no racism in their church if the church is predominantly Caucasian or predominantly African American? Now, I can almost understand predominantly Hispanic, and the reason why, or Asian. And the reason why I would say that is because of the language barrier.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, would you tend to agree, Pastor Campbell?
Yes, there are Hispanic congregations within the LCMS. There are also Vietnamese, Chinese. Matter of fact, some of the guys that went through seminary with me were going back to launch a Hmong congregation. Another brother is going back on the Indian reservation to launch a congregation. So I agree, language issues are issues, as are ethnic and, to be honest, racial issues here in the United States in particular.
Okay. All right. So really, we can't really say, okay, well, I mean, not logically say that the Hispanic congregation or the Asian congregation or, the Japanese congregation are being racist because.
Right. I understand what you're saying.
People. We all speak in the same language, and basically reading from the same book, Bible, whatever the denomination is. Okay, whatever the denomination is, we're reading from the same Bible or book, even if it's the Quran or the Book of Mormon. Everybody in that particular denominational belief is reading from the same book, and so they're all speaking the same language. So wouldn't you say, Pastor Campbell, that it should be more of a mixture? Under the Lutheran faith, you said that there's 90 something percent Caucasian. So why do you think that is?
Well, I didn't give an actual percentage. Actually, it's funny because when we were talking last week, I actually had some physical documents in front of me that I could, draw on, and I don't have them with me today because, like I said, we've been so busy getting ready for tomorrow. However, to answer the second part of your question, a large part of it is cultural. For the most part, churches, most Lutheran churches, are older churches. For example, in my hometown, the oldest church in the city is St. John's Lutheran Church. It's over 100 years old. At the time that church was built, the community surrounding that church was German. But now it's a Black community. So the church reflects its neighborhood. Just like many of the churches, in Las Vegas on the west side reflect that neighborhood.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so you're saying to me that the church is this the church that you presently attend? It is sitting in a African American community?
Oh, no. That's actually the church near where I grew up. The church where I'm serving right now, it's in a community that's kind of mixed. It's an older neighborhood. A lot of older people live there, but it does have some variety of ethnicities and races.
Okay, all right. Miss Amy, you have a question, a comment, or something?
Yes, so I'm just paying attention, and I noticed that you said that it's more so you would think that that's because it's cultural. Just listening and just being observant of the church world, I've noticed that to me, it seems like there's a level of segregation still that's going on in the church. And I know we're talking about church and racism and does it exist? Now, I think like if there's a bias at the same time, because it's like most people think, okay, if you go to a Baptist church, they automatically assume that it's going to be Black people. Or if you go to a Lutheran church, for example, I'm assuming that it's going to be Caucasian people. Yeah, and then if I go to a Kojic church, it's going to be predominantly Black people. So there is a level of segregation and stereotype based off denominations. What would you say? What would you say? Why would you say that is? Why do you think that there's a stereotype based upon versus cultural?
Yeah. Well, one of the things that, we've come to see here in America, you can legislate what people will do in the public square, in public businesses, so on and so forth. But you can't legislate what people will do in their own private spaces. You can bus kids to a school that's in a predominantly white neighborhood, and so you'll have a blended school. But you can't bus people to church. You can't make them go. And the reality is, people tend to think of their Sunday activity as their sacred space, and they want to go to a place where they feel comfortable, where they're surrounded by sights and sounds and smells and touches and everything that's familiar. So, yeah, do Black people, for example, do they move into the suburbs and still drive back into town to go to the church that their grandma went to? They do. Do white people move out further into the suburbs? And if their church doesn't move out with them, do they drive back to the church where grandma went to? Yes, sometimes they do. Um, is there anything in our theologies that should make that happen? No. Our theology basically is open to anybody, everybody, whatever you look like, wherever you're coming from. You're a sinner who needs to hear the gospel. You're a sinner
Okay.
that's saved by grace. It applies to anybody and everybody. But,
Okay. Okay.
one of the
All
things
right.
that okay, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, don't get too far ahead of us there, because we
All right.
got some questions that we're gonna be asking you in just a few minutes.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay. And but right now, we have some information that we're gonna share with you, and this is just something that we found, some articles that we found, and you tend to think that quote unquote Christian people would not have any type of racist attitude or anything like that because of their professing to be children of God. And of course, with them professing to be children of God, they're saying that we are all children of God. So if we're all children of God, then why are there, it tends to be racism in the churches? And I think a lot of churches don't think that they have racism going on in their church at all. They don't feel that way because they're just comfortable in their comfort zone. But how many Black people do you see that will go to a predominantly white church and feel comfortable with their worship? You just don't find that too often, and vice versa. Very seldom do you find Caucasian people that feel comfortable going to a Black church and fellowshipping on a regular basis. They might drop in and visit, but then they're gone, right? Okay, so we want to share some information that we came across here. And Pastor, when we finish with this, I'm going to read something here to you, and then I would like for you to comment on what I read. I would like to get your feedback on how you felt about the article. Okay?
Sure.
This was an article that was found. Okay, this was an article that was found in on ChristianProphecy.org. Christian, not Christian, but ChristianProphecy.org, and it's titled Racism and the Church. It's quite lengthy, so we're going to break it up into sections, and we're going to ask you to comment on this when we're done. This person says, I was experiencing that ritual so common to every American male, the lengthy, boring wait in the local barber shop. This was nearly 20 years ago, and hairstylists were still thought of in those days as for women and sissies only. No, this was a real man's habitat, a small town shop complete with rough whiskered farmers and no nonsense barbers who expected that if you got into their chair, they had every right to cut off the great majority of your hair. I was prepared to hear the usual run of conversation about hunting, fishing, and other various and sundry guy topics, when suddenly the tone turned nasty. One of the barbers started into a tirade of his disgust with Black people, literally sprinkling his ideas with that derogatory term that told me this was no casual bigot. As I listened, I found myself getting angrier and angrier until shortly I was ready to walk out of the shop. Then the discussion changed again and turned to, of all things, the end times. One of the men mentioned that he had heard that the government had come up with a new type of identification, which would be in form of an invisible tattoo that would be placed on the hand. At that, the barber immediately began to warn him that at all costs, he should never allow that to be done to him. I decided to stay around and have a little talk with this theologically correct racist. When it was my turn in the chair, I asked the barber what he had meant when he had warned the man not to receive the tattoo on his hand. He asked me if I had heard of the book of Revelation. I told him, yes, I thought I had heard of it. Then he emphatically declared that Revelation stated that if any man would take the surprise, I asked, oh, do you believe in the Bible? He was indignant, assuming that he must have some big city liberal in his chair. I sure do, he proudly proclaimed. Then why don't you believe the part which says, he that says he is in the light and hates his brother is in the darkness still? I asked. He gave me a confused look and said, I don't know what you mean. I told him, you've been saying all these bad things about Black people. Those don't sound like the words of a born-again Christian to me. At that, he began to understand what I was getting at and finished our conversation with, never said I was. I wondered if I were going to leave that shop with a mohawk haircut, but the Lord's mercy, I didn't. So, Pastor, I'd like to get your comment on that, Pastor Campbell. What do you have to say?
Clearly, we do have some cultural issues in the Black and white communities. We have political differences, we have social differences, differences even in terms of, in general, what we like in music and how we worship. And I would be willing to bet that if you were to go into a Black barbershop, you would hear some conversations that might make some white people feel uncomfortable too, because we're sitting in our comfortable space where we're free to say what we think about things, that some things that we have to keep to ourselves when we're out in the public square. And they do the same thing, not for the same reason. And the reason I say that is this: the issue of racism for me is an issue of power. Now, I could dislike white people. I don't. Let me get that clear. I couldn't have gone through 4 years in seminary at Concordia Irvine if I had some sort of innate hostility against white people. I couldn't be in the LCMS if I had that hostility. But even if I did, there is very little that I can do, either as an individual or even as part of the Black community in Paris, California, to harm white people. Okay, I can't pass any laws. I can't do anything. I don't control the police department, anything like that. So there's nothing I can do to negatively impact them if I hated white people. But a white person who's in a position of authority can have laws passed, can make use of law enforcement, the courts, the economic system, all these things to keep Blacks in a position of relative powerlessness. And when they talk about things like institutional racism and race-based privilege or white privilege, those are the things that are being talked about. Now, when you talk to the average white person, they don't think about these things. In a certain sense, it's like asking a fish to think about water. In a country that in its roots, in its historical development, it developed in a racist climate. And yes, we've made great strides to overcome that past, but that past is the foundation upon which this country was built. And aside from going all the way down to the bottom, digging up the foundation, starting all over, there's not much you can do about that. It is what it is.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you for sharing your insight on that. Now, Miss Amy is going to share something with you that's really, really, I would say it's real hard. Okay, go ahead, Miss Amy.
In 1995, we have seen several major events which have vividly portrayed the racial animosities and unrest which still mar our nation's landscape. The O.J. Simpson trial was a watershed which revealed how differently most Blacks and whites perceived the exact same events. After the verdict of not guilty, 70% of whites were convinced that O.J. had literally gotten away with murder, while nearly 70% of Blacks rejoiced unapologetically that a corrupt police system had not been able to frame an innocent man. At Howard Brown University, young Black law students wept, screamed, and cheered ecstatically after the verdict was read. But when white America saw their jubilation on the news, they were sickening. Short after, we saw Louis Farrakhan Million Man March in which between 400,000 to 900,000, depending on who doing the counting, Black men gathered together atonement for past transgressions to encourage one another to take their destinies into their own hands. Black Christian leaders debated amongst themselves whether to participate in the march. Some did, claiming that the goal were worthy, even if the messenger was suspect, while others stayed home, feeling they could not endorse any movement headed by men who verbally attacked Jews, Koreans, Palestinians, Arabs, whites, and even Blacks who disagreed with him. While there was much division about the legitimacy of any march sponsored by Farrakhan, the overwhelming response to the event reveals that he clearly touched a nerve in the hearts and minds of many Black men. Besides,
Lost it.
Besides these two major events, 1995 also saw fierce debates about the need for affirmative action to determine efforts by the Promise Keeper movement to include Black ministers in their massive rallies and Colin Powell's brief flirtation with a run for presidency, an attempt which could have been successful had he desired for the nation's top match the fever of popularity he had with both Black and white Americans.
And Pastor, your comment on that is?
Well, let me start with the last one first. To be honest, I think if Colin Powell would have not been deterred by his concerns for safety, he would have reaped the harvest that Barack Obama reaped. I think he would have been elected president. For the most part, I would say that white people are tired of being called racist simply because they're white. At the same time, the way many of them view the way the nation operates, it sort of sounds as if they feel like the good that comes to them as a whole is completely deserved, and the troubles that befall the Black communities is completely earned. That if Black people would just stop doing X, Y, and Z, things would get better. Well, whether that's true or not about, the war on drugs, which is an issue in itself, or about the gang wars that are fueled by the war. Talk about single parenting, which, by the way, there's just as much a problem in white America with regard to family structures as it is with Black America. There's just as much divorce and family breakups in white homes as there are in Black homes. So the things that create for chaos or weakness in a community, they exist in white communities as much as Blacks. The difference, though, is that they are able, for the most part, to absorb those shocks, where Black communities are less able to absorb them. When you have a community where there's a lot of violent activity going, a lot of criminal activity, and then at the same time, you got a less than friendly relationship between the community and the police, it makes it harder to resolve the crime problem. And race plays into that. Are you all hearing me okay?
Yes, we're hearing you
Okay.
fine. We just letting you talk.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
So, and a white person will say these things and feel like, well, I'm just saying the truth. If they would just do this better. But then when you say, well, wait a minute, how are we supposed to, stop the gang violence and the drug crimes when there's no legitimate jobs in the city, when the jobs have all moved out to the suburbs? I grew up in a city that went through that. In 1967, Gary, Indiana elected the first Black mayor over a major metropolitan area, Richard Gordon Hatcher. Shortly afterward, many of the local businesses moved into a new city called Maryville that was created illegally in violation of Indiana state law. But it was done so that the white citizens of Gary could find a place where they would feel comfortable and not subject to any risks by the fact that Richard Hatcher was mayor. Shortly afterward, the steel mill had a problem in that Japanese steel industry was dumping steel on U.S. shores. Well, that affected the Blacks in Gary as much as it affected the whites in Youngstown, but Gary, Indiana was much less able to sustain that shock.
Okay, Pastor, you're getting away from me because you're going way, 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 way out into history right now. Really what I want you to do with me right now is I want you to stay on the topic of that article that we share with you. Just stay within the body of that, because we're going to be going into history at some point on the show.
Okay.
So I really don't want you to get so far away from us, and then by the time we get there, it's already been said. Okay.
Well, let me keep it to
Whatever
1995.
we're sharing with you right now, we want you to just just stay within that that topic.
Stay
Okay.
in 1995. Okay, well, 1995, short and sweet. It wasn't something new. It was just more of the same. There was the only difference between 1995 and 1965 is just the cast of characters and the location. The same attitude still exists. And here we are, 20 years later, and basically the same attitude still exists. When you talk about Tamir Rice, the attitudes of people will often be affected by their ethnicity on how they view that situation. That other man that was shot in an Ohio Walmart carrying a toy gun, an air gun, and yet the police come in, he's carrying it openly, and they shot him.
Okay.
As soon as they turned the corner, said, "Drop your gun," and they shot him before he could move. Now, groups have done studies, they've done simulations, they've had people of color standing out in the public holding a weapon and watched how the police responded. Had white people with the same weapons standing, watching how the police respond. We hear reports, and again, for everything that I say on the one side, somebody else can say, well, wait a minute. On the other hand, there are more whites getting shot by cops. There are more whites, cumulatively in prison than blacks. In numbers, there are going to be more whites. But we're like 13% of the population. So there should be numerically more whites being beat up by cops or being shot by cops.
Okay, listen. We're running out of time, Pastor. So I've got some more information that I need to cover here before we go off the air.
All right.
Okay. So we need to. I want to talk about the church's role. Okay. So I need to quickly share this with the listeners and viewers. This information here, the church's role. Okay, none can deny that blacks have made progress in the area of civil rights over the last 40 years. Seeing documentaries and conditions in the South in the 1950s makes one aware of how far we have come and just how miserable things were for blacks in those days. Drinking fountains marked for whites only, and the restaurants with notices that blacks were not welcome makes us appreciate the gains that have been made. They also make us wonder how America can ever have allowed such patently unfair practices to go on as long as they did. As we look back over the struggle for racial equality, we find that the church has indeed played a significant role. In England, an ex-slave trader who became a preacher, John Newton, author of the song Amazing Grace, felt so bad about the inhumanity of slavery that he influenced another British Christian godly, William Wilberforce, to fight for the rights of blacks. Wilberforce became a powerful politician and was probably the primary instrument under God to pressure England to make slavery illegal. In America's pre-Civil War days, that great evangelist and revivalist Charles Finney preached powerful messages about the evils of slavery and went so far as to state that it was impossible to be right with Christ and still hold to the toleration of slavery, a radical idea in those days. He established what may well have been the first integrated college in America in Oberlin, Ohio, which served as a base for him to go out and bring the winds of revival all across the nation. The foremost evangelist of our day, Billy Graham, also exhibited a great desire for racial equality early on in his ministry, making a commitment in the 1950s that he would not hold a crusade where whites and blacks were not free to sit wherever they pleased. In his book, Peace with God, Graham indicted the church for not keeping pace with the courts in working for civil rights. The church should be the pace setter. The church should voluntarily be doing what the federal courts are doing by pressure and compulsion. And the church should be doing it because the Holy Spirit has transformed their hearts. Where are we today? Yes, we have made progress, yet there is still much to be done. The vast majority of white Christians go to all white churches, and the majority of blacks attend all black congregations. Racial slurs are still heard in public places, even among professing Christians. Trailer parks have rules which insist that any trailer that is sold must be moved out of the park, a rule which is conveniently enforced if the purchaser is black, but somehow forgotten if the new resident is white. A small number of black athletes may make millions, but the average black youngster will have to work much harder than his white counterpart if he intends to go to college and rise above a minimum wage salary. The answer must lie in the awareness that racism is a blight upon our nation. Not only the attitude of whites toward blacks, but blacks toward whites, Orientals toward Hispanics, and society in general toward Jews. Many conservative Christians are quick to denounce abortion and homosexuality, but are strangely silent in the issue of racism. It's almost as though racism has become a conservatively correct issue to overlook. And we've got about 3 minutes left. It looks like you have a little interference over there. We've got about 3 minutes left here on the show, so we'd like to get your comment on that last article, and then we're going to be going out of here, and we'll be back next week with part 3. Go ahead,
Okay.
Pastor.
Well, for starters, tomorrow afternoon at 4:30, there will be a large, very important ceremony that will take place. Probably there will be, more whites than blacks there. Most of the other ministers that will be participating will be white, but obviously I am black. The congregation that I'm going to be installed at is largely white, but they have received my ministry enthusiastically since I've been there. The place where I am working now, while they look for a permanent pastor, has received me enthusiastically, has supported my work with great vitality. And as a matter of fact, many of them would like me to be their permanent pastor. It's up to the call committee to, make its determination based on what they see the church is needing. But the thing is this: at the end of the day, it's up to individuals in the congregation to intentionally step out of their comfort zones. There's nothing we can do to make people, want to sit across from somebody or worship next to somebody that is different. All we can do is pray and remember that we have one Father, we have one faith, one Lord, one baptism, one God and Father of all, who's above all, and whose Spirit is in us all.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Pastor. Listen, we're gonna be back next week with more more about the racism in the church. I tell you what, this is something. It's a force to be reckoned with. Would you agree, Miss Amy?
Yeah.
Okay, so listen, everybody, we're going to be getting out of here, and we're going to see you next week, and y'all know who I am. I'm Wiley. the queen of gospel.
And I'm Amy Rucker, the voice of my generation.
And y'all know what show this is. This is the Wildina Show. And this is where the rubber meets the road. We'll see you next week.